Hi, this is Brian Manko from the Rocky View Entrepreneur Series, and today I have with interview number 2, Tazs Rajan from Bromwich and Smith. And Tazs has become a great referral partner of mine, and I send clients to her as much as possible, and and vice versa. So Tazs is an extension of my practice. When I don't have the expertise that Tazs would. I just do accounting, I do tax, I do personals, I do corporates, and Tazs takes care of the rest. So I'd like to introduce Tazs Rajan today from Bromwich and Smith, and we're going to talk a little bit about consumer proposals and bankruptcies. So welcome, Tazs.
Thank you, Brian. And I certainly wouldn't say you're just an accountant. You're a pretty phenomenal accountant and a pretty cool guy too.
Oh, thanks, Tazs. I appreciate that. So anyways, yeah, so do you want to do a sort of a preamble about Bromwich and Smith, or should we start to talk about LITs right away?
Oh, well, I'd love to just quickly tell you a little bit about Bromwich and Smith. So thank you for that opportunity. Bromwich and Smith, we are licensed insolvency trustees. Our head office is based in Calgary, Alberta, but we serve BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and brand new, we are now serving New Brunswick, by the way. So that's really, really great. It just means we can reach so many more Canadians who are feeling really overwhelmed by the weight of their debt. Licensed insolvency trustees are the only ones that are federally legislated to administer your debt forgiveness programs in Canada, which are consumer proposal and bankruptcy. And my role here is community engagement partner. So I'm part of the marketing team. So I write a lot of our blogs. I get to do these kinds of things, interviews with TV, radio, referral partners. I build our referral partner, relationships. And then I also do a lot of webinars, lunch and learns, panel speaking, any of that stuff as well. And it's a privilege to be here. So thanks for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure and privilege to be with you as well. So why don't we talk about LITs? What is an LIT?
Yes, that's a great question. What is a licensed insolvency trustee? Licensed insolvency trustees are federally legislated by the Canadian government. Now, each province has a little bit of a slightly different provincial, provincial regulations. However, licensed insolvency trustees are federally legislated. So, they're the only ones that, legally by the Canadian government are, I'd say, like authorized, licensed to offer debt forgiveness in Canada. And it's quite unique that as, Canadians, North Americans, we actually have debt forgiveness. I mean, I was born in East Africa, and I know for sure in most of Africa, there's no such thing as debt forgiveness, okay? If you took a loan and you're sick or you've had a death in your family and all of a sudden you can't pay the loan, like you got to figure it out. You're going to have to pay, or you're, somehow, or you go to jail, or it goes down to your family and the next generation and the next generation. There is no debt forgiveness. So we're very, very fortunate that we live in Canada. We have debt forgiveness. And it's important for Canadians to understand that that debt forgiveness is only licensed through an LIT or a licensed insolvency trustee.
Interesting. Yeah, a global perspective on things kind of makes it, kind of obvious how good we do have it here. Still worth managing though, and that's where some of the coaching comes in. So then the difference then, you kind of touched on it, the difference between consumer proposal and bankruptcy in Canada.
Yeah, that's really great because, previously we would only talk about bankruptcy and we were called bankruptcy trustees. And now it's expanded to licensed insolvency trustees. So insolvent means that you are unable to pay your debts as they come due, or if you were to add up all your assets, they would not be enough to cover your liabilities. And so the two ways for someone who is insolvent to have, to get relief from that are with a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy. So quickly, the differences or the similarities, both are done through a licensed insolvency trustee firm. A consumer proposal, there's a couple of really great benefits, and it's such a great alternative to a bankruptcy. I would say it's the best alternative to a bankruptcy. There's debt management programs out there and credit counseling. There's all sorts of things, but I really, truly believe consumer proposal is the best alternative. So in a consumer, your assets do not have to vest with the trustee. So a lot of times, Brian, you've probably heard people say, oh no, I don't want to call a trustee. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my car, right? I won't be able to be the director of my business. That's probably one that you might hear as an accountant. So I'd like to, demystify that myth. It's not true. When you go through a consumer proposal, your assets stay intact. Yes, you will need to disclose to the trustee what are all your liabilities, what are all of your assets, but they don't have to vest with the trustee. The other thing with a consumer proposal is it's a payment, basically it's the trustee negotiates on your behalf that you pay a portion of your overall debt. You're not paying back all of your debt, you're paying a portion of that. And that is a legally binding agreement. It's a settlement on your creditors. And so once you sign into that, the creditors cannot call you. They can't garnish your wages or your bank account or put you into collections or any of those actions that they could normally take, a judgment, things like that. Something of interest to you and a lot of your clients is, Canada revenue debt can be included in a consumer proposal, which in most cases cannot. So I know, again, for me, when I was a mortgage broker, there was a time where I had an $80,000, the government, and you and I have talked about this, where the government can sort of, they can assess you if you haven't filed your taxes, right? They can base it on the information they have from your past. And there was no way I could pay that $80,000 back. And, there's probably other people that suffer that. So a consumer proposal is great for that. You can pay off your consumer proposal early. So you have up to 5 years to do a payment plan on your consumer proposal. But let's say you get a raise, you get an inheritance and you just want to get rid of it right away. You absolutely can. There's no penalties in paying it off early. You can apply for credit during your consumer proposal, so you can start to rebuild while you're in consumer proposal. So those are some of the key benefits of a consumer proposal. Also, it doesn't impact your credit report quite as much as a bankruptcy does. Now, in some cases, you have no choice. Bankruptcy really is your choice. So on the bankruptcy side of things, a first-time bankruptcy is only 9 months long, as long as there isn't something called surplus income. I'm not going to get into all of that right now. So 9 months long. You cannot apply for credit until you are discharged from your bankruptcy. Your assets do vest with the trustee. So this is where, yes, we've got to look at the house, the car, what else is there. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose it all. Like I said, there's certain parts of the act that are provincial. So depending on which province you're in Alberta, you've got $40,000 worth of equity that you get to keep in your home and nobody's going to touch that. All your registered products you get to keep. So if you have RRSPs, insurance products that have a beneficiary, don't go liquidating those until you talk to a trustee and figure out what your options are. It will impact your credit more. It stays on your credit report. They stay on your credit report about the same length of time. Like I said, you won't be able to apply for credit until you're discharged. So we always say bankruptcy is the last resort, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Well, that's got to be comforting for a lot of people to know, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are just, at this time, just kind of shivering out there saying like, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. COVID has been, a lot of people have benefited from COVID. At the same time, there's a lot of people who are just, not sure of what their options may be. So a day in the life, when should someone seek help with their debts? And I just talked about shivering. I do know of people who kind of just, they're not doing great. It's hard to admit that to yourself, because normally people are very successful. They've been successes all their life, and then they stick their neck out just at the wrong time, in COVID here, and then maybe things aren't going great. When or what do you see? I guess I should say, like, when do people seek help for their debts? When should they? And what do you see normally? Like, what's the most common thing for you?
Yeah. I would say most of the time at Bromwich and Smith, by the time somebody's reaching out for help, they're really at their wits' end. Their mental health is down the drain. Maybe their physical health. They've been holding it off as long as they could. And so when should they be reaching out for help though? I'm going to use the analogy of, my favorite analogy is, when's the best time to plant an apple tree? It was probably about 100 years ago. But when's the next best time to plant it? Right now.
Yeah.
Right now. Exactly. So I would really love to encourage Canadians, maybe you're kind of sitting there going, I don't think it's that bad. I'm probably not insolvent. I probably don't need to talk to a trustee. That's the time you reach out and talk to us. It's a free, no obligation, completely confidential consultation. So you have nothing to lose and everything to gain by making that phone call, having this conversation. And you want to have that conversation somewhere where you're not going to be judged. You're going to be treated with grace and respect. That's Bromwich and Smith for you. Call us up. You can talk to us for 10 minutes, an hour, you can have 2 or 3 different conversations. It's not going to cost you a penny, but you're really going to get clarity on your situation, your options, what is going to be the impact of each option. And then you can make a really informed and empowered decision. It's not coming from this place of fear. It's coming from this place of actually really knowing and understanding, okay, this is my situation. These are my options. These are all the outcomes of the different options. So I'm going to choose this, and you get to choose versus being backed into a corner where you have no choice. And your lenders can call you into bankruptcy. So don't do that. Don't wait for that.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. So in other words, there's lots of counseling available right within Bromwich and Smith.
Absolutely.
Man. Well, okay. So that answers that question too. What would your top tips be for someone to avoid having to come see you in the first place?
Oh, that's a good one. Tips are all good and great when things are even keel. It's kind of when COVID happened, right? So I'm going to say a couple tips are, I think you touched on it a minute ago, that, when you're feeling kind of successful, you're feeling like you're doing well, it's very hard to admit even to ourselves that things are not going good. So my first tip is, if you're in that place where you're kind of like struggling, I want you to remember you're not alone. About, 48 to 52% of Canadians say that if their paycheck was 1 week late, they would not be able to pay their bills. So as a solopreneur or as an entrepreneur, it's quite a bit of this feast and famine. So you're not alone. That's the first thing I want Canadians to know, is that if you're struggling a bit with your debt, with your finances, you are not alone. Number two, I would say the big one is to be proactive. And partly that's understanding, like, what does it look like? How do I know when it's that time to be asking for help? So definitely we have a lot of really great tips on that on our blogs at www.bromwichandsmith.com. And to be proactive, don't wait to be reactive, be proactive, get those, ideas figured out, figure out what you're going to do. And my number three tip, I guess, to avoid coming to see us, then it would be just the basics. Do a budget, actually have a budget, do it, look at it, stay on top of your budget, create an emergency fund. And it doesn't have to be a huge one, but just have something to help you out in those tough times. So you're not having to borrow from, your lending products when emergencies occur, and whether it's a pandemic or another type of an emergency. And then do some goal planning as well, short-term, medium-term, long-term, set those goals and put a plan in action. And hopefully that helps you avoid seeing us. But if you've got to come see us, I want you to know there is life after insolvency. You will get credit again. You will be able to own a home. Just get that stuff taken care of so that you can move on.
So, well, one of the things you and I talked about beforehand is talking about your own debt journey. So I don't know if you want to share that or not. If you do,
yes,
feel free.
I am happy to share that, because of course our goal at Bromwich and Smith is to normalize the conversation of debt. So, if I don't share my story, we're not normalizing this conversation. So yeah, for me, I was living in Edmonton at that time. I had just started a new position with Expedia Cruise Ship Centers, and it's 100% commission. There's no base salary, no benefits. And so I was going in to start doing my training, and I got rear-ended. It was a very serious, really bad car accident. I had a little bit of, I had some savings, I had some RSP. So that took me for honestly just a couple of months, not for very long. The bills don't stop. Just because you're not working and you're in pain doesn't mean the bills all of a sudden stop. So I was in a really, really tough place. I can clearly remember being on the phone with NMAX. My utilities were late. And I was crying, I had a concussion. It was hard for me to even think clearly. I was a little bit foggy, but I remember crying on the phone with her and going, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just don't have the funds for this. I may have to declare bankruptcy. And she says to me, if you can't afford to pay this, you can't even afford to go bankrupt. I was like, oh my, yeah, I was really down and out. And I went through all of, the shame, the guilt, the fear, the fear of being judged, the fear of losing everything, judging myself, the stigma, sort of pulling away a little bit from friends and family. Like I've been through all of that. And, looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't have to go through all of that. We have a solution. We live in Canada, and bankruptcy, like I remember even when I said it to her on the phone, it felt like the end of the world to me. I just thought like, oh, I'm going to declare bankruptcy and that's it. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? I'm too young to do this. And, you just think that you're never going to be able to do anything again. But I am living proof. I have 2 credit cards, I have a mortgage, and honestly, my credit score right now is better than it has ever been. And that's because there really is life after you take care of that mess.
Yeah. Well, it just shows, the fragile balance that we really do live in. I mean, we kind of think that all of us are going to be, those of us that are doing well and, things are pretty consistent and stable. It's like, oh, what could possibly go wrong? Well, that's one thing that could go wrong. What happened to you
Yes.
is a perfect example. Man, well, so then, okay, you just answered the question about credit cards and loans and credit ratings and all that kind of stuff as well. And then I was also going to ask, what is a stay of proceedings and why is that important?
I'm so glad you're asking me that, Brian, because the stay of proceedings, first of all, that is something that you could only get through a licensed insolvency trustee. This is not offered through any credit counseling companies or through any debt management companies, okay? Because only licensed insolvency trustees are federally legislated. So the stay of proceedings, I kind of look at it kind of like this bubble, or like you're in this cone, okay? Or like a shield. Once you sign into either your consumer proposal or your bankruptcy, whichever one it is, once you sign in, you are protected by the stay of proceedings. The stay of proceedings basically makes it, legally binding that your creditors cannot call you, send letters of demand, take you to collections, put a lien on your property, garnish your pay, or garnish your bank account, or any of those, activities that I know right now during COVID, your lenders aren't actually, engaging in these activities. But make no mistake, once the government stops with their, I know they've extended it again for October. Once that stops, once the lenders need to start paying their bills, they'll be coming after you. And that is the part, I know people personally that, are in a program, they're making their payments, they are taking care of their debt, and yet the phone calls and the demand letters and the threats don't stop. And so even though they're taking action, they're doing this thing, their mental health is really suffering. And it's this like, you don't even want to look at your phone. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to check your mail. There's so much fear and anxiety that comes from that. So a stay of proceedings just gets rid of all of that. And it gives you that peace of mind while you are either paying back your creditors through your consumer proposal, a portion of it, or while you are finishing off your bankruptcy. And again, the stay of proceedings, that cone of protection is only available through a licensed insolvency trustee.
Yeah, and I can see that being very useful as well. I did have one client who had some troubles as well. And what CRA did because of his CRA debt is they approached all of his clients and said, don't pay him, pay us directly. And so they effectively ruined his business because, he got behind, and I don't really think it was that bad of a situation, but, in terms of him repaying it. But at the same time, he, all of his clients got letters saying, well, your vendor here is in a bit of trouble and please pay us instead of him for a while. And whatever they said, it was not flattering to him as a business person.
No.
Yeah.
And that's just it. I mean, these are so many things that, before I was in this industry, like you have no idea the power that your lenders have, and especially CRA, man, have they got power, right? And so, like you say, his situation didn't seem that bad, but again, had he reached out and had we gotten him into a consumer proposal, CRA would never have been able to do that.
Wow. Well, that's good news. Yeah, as you say, anything can happen. You had a freak accident. Accidents happen every day, but what happens to you? I mean, it really hits home, and oh man. Well, and that shows the value of all this in a conversation with you, Taz. And so I guess that kind of covers all the questions that I've had here. Do you have anything else that you
Awesome.
want to add?
No, just thank you, Brian, so much for being part of helping to normalize this conversation. Because, as in your field, there's the tax side of things, and you're in the financial industry, and your clients already have that trust and that faith in you. So I think it's really important to open up these conversations to build that trust where people can feel comfortable to be able to say, hey, we're struggling and we're not sure how it's going to, I think we tend to put on this brave face, but in reality, we're struggling. And I just, I really hope that you, through this, your clients know that you're not the only one, and that there is help, and that there is a great, abundant, prosperous life after taking care of debt. And, debt doesn't discriminate. That's the other thing I want to say. I think it's easy for us, if you've never been in this situation, it's kind of easy to judge and assume that people that go see a licensed insolvency trustee are just bad with money, or they're just lazy, or, well, they just took on more debt than they could handle. And in reality, what we see at Bromwich and Smith, like you just alluded to, it's often, an accident, a disability, a critical illness, death of a spouse, divorce, job loss, or now this pandemic. Like, you think about how much this pandemic is, like you said, some people are better off through the pandemic. I definitely see that. But many, 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 many people have lost not only their job, but their entire industry is gone. There's been other things. People have lost people through COVID. People have lost people, their spouses who maybe was the only bread earner and things like that. So, I hope we can take away some of that judgment and stigma from others, but also from ourselves, to know that, I know what I went through. There was a lot of judgment on my part on myself. And I'm like, you can just shed that now and go, all I do is, it's like picking up the phone and calling 811. Like, nobody has any shame or guilt about calling 811. It should be the same about calling a licensed insolvency trustee.
Oh, that's so great. And then, so how do they reach you, Taz? Just bromwichandsmith.com is one. And
yes, absolutely. And then our toll-free number, which is 1-855-884-9243. And then if you want to speak to a debt relief specialist, it's the first option, number one. So 1-855-884-9243 or www.bromwichandsmith.com. We're all over social media as well: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We've got some really great YouTube videos. I mean, even if you don't want to pick up the phone and call us right away, check out our blogs, check out those YouTube videos. It's going to give you so much information and just, give you a little bit of that confidence that, yes, you can do this.
Yeah, that is excellent. Well, I'm sure that's going to provide a lot of relief to people, just knowing this, that this exists. And I think a lot of people, as we say, the old past stigma, but this will definitely help. Well, Taz,
Awesome.
thank you very much. I don't really have any further questions. So I guess for now, I'll just say thank you very much for this information. And I know all my clients will appreciate it. And, I guess we'll do another interview in the near future at some point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. Lovely to be here.
Thank you, Taz. Bye for now.
You bet.